Hello and welcome to the Hawks Nest live stream show with the grand return of our man, Seahawks Brendon Nelson. I know most of you already out there should already know, but if you don't already by this point, Seahawks Brendon Nelson runs an awesome channel over here on the Seahawks side of things. He's covers news in depth. Does daily videos, Brendan, a couple videos a day often. So go over there and sub to his channel. He gets into an in-depth point of in the way he looks at the Seahawks in the way that I don't get into. It gives you another perspective on this team. And again, I always like the perspective, Brendan, of guys that do this intelligently and look at this not with pom-pom waving, but look at it with sort of sober, clear eyes as to the situation and what they're looking at. So thank you for coming on in here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on, Brandon. It's a lot of fun.
Well, we got two subjects I think we got to dive into first off the top before we get to the meat of the good stuff, the stuff that we want to really probably talk about. And first place we got to start with is, of course, turning over the corpse that was that loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday Night Football. What are some of your general takeaways from that game? Everyone knows why we won, why we didn't win, Geno Smith, etc. But what are your kind of specific takeaways in looking at that game that you walked away with?
Well, the main thing I took away from that game was that somewhere on that sideline, LJ Collier was smiling because he saw how bad our defensive line looked in that game without him, and he knew he had that $100 million extension waiting for him at the end of the season. Okay, I'm not even going to go there today, but it's really kind of interesting how it almost seemed kind of obvious based off what Carroll said at halftime to the sideline reporter that he was basically going to take over the offense in the second half. And then you see the offense actually have a little bit of success in that second half. It almost makes you scared that he might learn the wrong lesson from something like that. So my first thought, unfortunately, even though I think we did do some things pretty well in that game, is that concern of him. I feel like Carroll learns the wrong lesson from a lot of things. I feel like looking at how we played in that second half versus the first half on offense, I wonder what Carroll is going to learn from that. That's probably the most interesting thing for me to come out of that game. Defensively, it just really strikes me how even when the defense doesn't play bad, because they didn't play bad in that game necessarily, how lifeless it is. Like they don't force any turnovers. They don't make any big negative plays for the offense. They don't get pressure. Sometimes they manage to force a punt, and that's about all you can get out of them. It's just crazy that we've gotten to this point with a supposed defensive mastermind genius head coach that we've gotten to the point now where all the defense can do at best is just occasionally get off the field. How lifeless it is. And we did see a little bit of a spark from guys like a Trey Brown, and I had people talking my ear off about Trey Brown all week so far. So if you want a silver lining to pull out of that game, that for me would be one, because he looked better than I thought he was going to look. And I know it was a easy first game for him because he's playing a quarterback that can't throw the ball more than 12 yards. Yeah. But I don't know. It wasn't a bad game. I wasn't too unhappy with anything that I saw. But again, actual football games with this team right now feel like a distraction. Like, it was kind of cool to see them play well in some areas, and it was kind of sad to see them ultimately lose that game. But it just doesn't feel like it matters that much right now, winning or losing one game against a mediocre at best team. So that's really all I can pull away from that game coming out of it. I know you did a long live stream about it, talking about it, and yeah, I don't know if I can say too much more than that.
Yeah, the Carroll thing would be my main takeaway with that, if he did take the reins of the offense, and whether or not, frankly, he's taking the reins of the offense, or he's about to take the reins, or he's partially taking the reins. Any of him taking any of reins of said offense are wrong. And frankly, it's a little bit, while we will push forward to this eventually here in this live stream, this is a little bit, again, why I harp so much on it's time for change. It's not that the grand old things that always caught Carroll are catching him now once again. You know, the patient offense that'll move a ball up the field and not try to take the deep shot. That's not what's happening here. What we're seeing in actuality instead is we're seeing not really a great ability to stop the run. They did a little better in this game. You're giving up still not a ton of passing yards, but again, that was to your point. Ben can't push the ball down the field. He's not passing against anybody this season, much less us. But no longer generating pressure, no longer causing turnovers. These are things that used to be, even in the bad Carroll defenses, things that you could still rely on saying, oh, we're ranked 16th, but we're top 7 in turnovers, and that's
Right.
built, that was to and it wasn't by happenstance. It was by how Carroll had constructed the defense. His defense is built to bend but don't break, but we're going to get those turnovers within that at some point in the football game. And that's the stuff that's now starting to fall away. And the thing with the offense is, with his, I've called it a little bit of his micromanager mold and the way he goes about stuff, but that's what it is. He comes back always time and time again to putting his fingerprints on everything. It's one of the reasons it's hard for me to assess John Schneider, because I can't peel back Carroll from Schneider, because Carroll's the one who actually has the final word at the end of the day. So it's the thing that does worry me as well. And he would love to do it with them just running the ball in 9 out of 11 runs or something like that in the second half to get down to the end zone. So Carroll's going to love leaning back in that direction of things too, say nothing of having the control.
Yeah. And I'm trying to, I want to be clear about something when I'm talking about how I think games right now are kind of a distraction. I'm not rooting for this team to lose. I'm not going to do that. I'm not interested in doing that kind of stuff. I'm just saying that even if they win a game or two here or there, it doesn't take away the big problems.
Yeah.
I know there are some people out there. I have some of them in my Discord. I have some of them in my streams who actually are rooting for this team to lose. And I kind of get it, but that's not something that I'm going to do. I'm going to watch the games. I'm going to just say, okay, either we're going to win or we're going to lose. And I'm going to try to be rational talking about it either way. But I'm not interested in rooting for this team to get blown out by 40 points every game just so Carroll leaves. I don't want to have to watch that every Sunday.
No, neither I. I mean, I'm still going to always be in the camp of hoping that they win week in and week out. I'm still going to always hold on to a little bit of it's what I've often talked about, Brendan. Get people that can think sort of in one lane and just think about one thing in one lane, but they can't think of things in multiple lanes. And so they can't think of it in, hey, I'll root for the team and hopefully they do good, but at the same time I can think about the fact that, to your point, there is this bigger story at play. There is this bigger storm on the horizon coming towards us that we need to be aware of and think about and turn over in our minds a little bit in consideration for what's coming, to understand, because it could be a lot of upheaval and change. It could be somebody that we're not thinking is going to be running this team a year from now that we never thought could be running this team. And that's what I think you're talking about, is that sits in just, it's sitting over the top of everything and hanging over everything. Russell's departure, it's leaning on everything, like a person hanging on your shoulders almost, But I mean, it's to me, the only pathway right now is that you get to a playoffs and you do some magical run. You're like the Steelers of 2005 that went 9-7. You go 10-7. You go 1-1 in these next two games. So you lose this game, you win against Jacksonville, and then Russell comes back and you go 7-2, backdoor the playoffs. And that would be great to see. I'd love to see that, Brendan. And I'm sure you would too at the end of the day, but it's not the realistic. We analyze this, right? You and I are trying to look at this and be, okay, this is what we're seeing, guys, and not lie to them and actually give them the skinny on it. And the skinny is not, oh, there's a marvelous run waiting to happen here, right?
Yeah. And the teams that do that, a lot of the time, they're teams that are willing to make big changes mid-season, like that Ravens team that won the Super Bowl 10 years ago. They fired their offensive coordinator in week 13 because they were like, I know we only have a month left, but we think we can do better. We think we can actually have a chance at this, but we need to make a big change right now, even though we have a month left in the regular season. I don't think we're going to do that. I don't think we're going to fire anybody mid-season. I don't think that's and in fairness, usually that kind of stuff doesn't work out that well, but this team doesn't have the willingness to do something like that, even if it would actually help.
Are you a buyer right now at this deadline, and you just sitting pat or selling?
I think there are a couple players on this team that you could consider selling, like Quandre Diggs, because I don't think he's going to be here next year. Maybe if somebody wants to give you a little something for a guy like a Carlos Dunlap, or I hate to say it, but maybe you find a team that needs somebody like a Dwayne Brown. I doubt it.
That was going to be the name, because it's left tackle is a position sometimes that can open up on teams. Like Ronnie Brown right now, I believe with the Ravens, is fighting through an injury, and the Cleveland Browns situation at left tackle, I think they're fighting through a little bit of a situation there. I mean, that you're not going to get a lot, granted, But to your point, these are two guys that are not going to be there in your long-term strategy.
Right. And the thing is, the current regime probably still believes in these guys because, as I always say, coaches are stubborn and they will take a look at a player who's struggling and they'll think, oh, they'll get it together. And it takes a lot of evidence for them to believe, okay, I was wrong. He doesn't have it anymore. So a lot of those players I just mentioned, like Dwayne Brown, who's really not playing well right now, and Carlos Dunlap, who's not having much of an impact on these games, I think that Carroll might be looking at these guys and still thinking that they're going to be fine. I just need to give them some more time. So I don't know if you can really sell, but I wouldn't mind trading some of those guys for a little bit of a asset, a little asset here or there.
I'm in the same camp where it's like, if somebody comes around with a good offer, I'm definitely not just doing a fire sale, but if there's an offer coming down at this point, it's the pathway to get in the playoffs. Like I just described, Russell comes back, gives you that 7-2 end, you get in 10-6 and 10-7. And okay, now your first round of the playoffs, you're going to Dallas, and then after that, you got to go to Lambeau. And then after that, you got to go to Tampa Bay, some pathway like that. Is that feasible? Really? Is that a feasible way of us getting to the Super Bowl? I don't, or even the conference championship, frankly, right? I mean, even the conference championship, like how do you, it's hard to see, man. And I'm not trying to be negative like you. I'm just trying to look at this realistically. Well, let's, before we kind of peg forward a little bit into looking at the kind of what we want to see for on the horizon and kind of start to turn over that a bit, because we're going to spend some time on that, folks. On this live stream is really looking a little bit like what we did last night. We're going to flesh upon that tonight and really go just elaborate further upon it, which is to look at maybe the far-reaching plan here. But let's look at the Saints matchup really quickly. Let's give a passing little bit of a glance to it. The Saints came in 2 years ago, Brendon, and they beat us here on the road with Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Brees out. Where do you see this game right now going? Where do you?
Well, the Saints to me are a relatively well-coached team. The Saints, I don't know how they do work their magic with this salary cap. I don't understand, but you watch a team like the Saints work, and it makes you wonder why you ever bother thinking about the salary cap as being real. Like when you look at all the things they manage to pull off year after year, you're just like, why am I even worried about how this team spends money? Like clearly it can always be worked around. But the thing is, with a coach like a Sean Payton, he's ready to run 800 slant passes to Michael Thomas if we play 8 yards off the line of scrimmage. In fact, I might have to, if you're playing daily fantasy, you might want to make sure you do whatever it takes to get Michael Thomas on your team.
Is he back in?
I think he is. I thought I heard he was coming back for this game. Okay. And with the way that we play defense, that's a bad recipe. They have a good defense, and shout out to Geno Smith. He played the best that he could. He's doing as good as you could hope a backup QB would for the most part. He's playing fine. That's a good defense. That is not a matchup that I'm excited for him to have to go up against. No. I think he'll be okay again, but okay is not going to win you a game against a good Saints team. So I just kind of have this general sense of apathy. It would be the main thing that I really want to see from this game is actually Darrell Taylor playing effectively, because that was obviously a terrifying moment for this franchise. And to see him get back on the field a week later would just be like, I don't know how to explain that. But he's one of the very few guys on this team who I'm actually a fan of, like wholeheartedly behind right now, because I see maximum effort from him at all times, and I see him making plays. He doesn't always play perfectly, but I'm seeing good positive things from him. So I want to see him out there, and of course I will. And if you're being straight honest, if you win this game, then there is some rational reason to believe this team could get it together and make that 10-7 playoff push that you were talking about. Like the time to hit the fire sale button doesn't really come until after you lose this game. I think that's fair to say. I know some fans are going to are going to say that, hey, if we beat the Saints, then we can go to the bye week at 4-4, and 4-4 is not that bad. We were 4-4 in 2015. We were 4-4 this year. We were 4-4 that year. But I don't see much going right with this team right now. Like I made a video this morning, I don't know if you saw it, breaking down how it seems like Norton and Carroll think that the way out of this hole we are in on defense is to keep dropping defensive linemen into coverage. I found like 12 examples against the Steelers, and I'm just trying to understand it. But it seems like we think that's our way out, and that's a way to just keep digging further into that hole. So
I
I
did
don't see
see it.
anything good.
I did see it, and here's just from my own personal historical perspective. I share all of your wonder as to why the hell they're doing it. Number one, because when you normally drop a defensive lineman into coverage, this came out of the zone blitz scheme of the Steelers with Dick LeBeau. He was the creator of the zone blitz, and on the back of the zone blitz was we're going to override. Essentially, you load up the line, you overload one side where you're going to get a free rusher, and then then you drop what the quarterback then does is he sees all those guys, right? So he goes, oh, hot route over here. I'm going to go the other side of the field. But then what you do is drop that defensive lineman into the hot route. So if it's a slant route, he's basically hooking into the slant route at that point. The corner's almost irrelevant who's on the backside. The problem when I did watch your video on this, the thing I don't understand, Brendan, is why you would do it in order to go with a 3-man rush, which they didn't do every time, granted, but there was a lot of that. What does that accomplish? Our 3-man, like we have the dogs, we have a 3-man dog front that's going to get to the quarterback at that point, and especially at times when the Steelers were running max protect with it, you're never going to get any in, and then the quarterback every time just goes right there and attacks it every single time he sees it. I don't understand it either. And again, it's more and more further proof, Brendan, as we go along. You can go Exhibit A, Your Honor, Exhibit B, Your Honor, Exhibit C, Your Honor. There's time and time again we see things showing up where it's like, wow, that's the only wrinkle they have. That's all they got. Oh, they went from cover 3 to cover 2. That's their new. We'll go now more into cover 2. That's what we're going to. Oh, let's use Jamal Adams 40% of the time in single high looks. That's the way to use him. That's the best way. That's a great use of his skills. You time and again, you go, these guys are not operating with the full deck here. That you're to that point of it, aren't we, Brendan? To the point of it's almost silly at times, some of the decision making and what they're trying to do in order to make this defense better.
Right, and Carroll actually tried to justify it. He basically said Roethlisberger gets the ball out so fast now, the pass rush will never get to him anyway. So you may as well just rush 3. Which, to me, I hear that and I go, okay, if that's your logic, then just rush 1 or rush nobody. Like if that's how you feel, if you feel like your pass rush has no chance of getting there anyway, just drop 11 back into coverage. And I mean, there were 1 or 2 times where we actually dropped Poona Ford into coverage in that game, which my thing is, I don't have an intrinsic objection to doing things like that on defense, but it's not working. Like, a serious question, when was the last time the Seahawks dropped a defensive lineman into coverage and the QB was so surprised and so badly didn't see it coming that he just threw the ball right to him and it got picked off? Like,
Never.
We don't ever see that. When you look at like the Jets under Rex Ryan or somebody like that, when they were running defenses like that, you would see that happen sometimes. Like a defensive lineman drops back into coverage, the QB doesn't see it coming, and he throws it and he goes, oh my God, there's a guy right there. And I didn't see him until it was too late. We don't do that. And I think it's because a lot of the time we're giving it away pre-snap that these guys are going to drop back into coverage. I think people see it coming. There was a play against Pittsburgh where I think Benson Mayowa lined up as a nickel cornerback. So of course he's going to drop back into coverage on that play. So
well, it reminds me of the Alton Robinson in the preseason where he was literally lined out wide as an outside corner in preseason against the Raiders. I have another reason why I think you're right. That's one of the reasons it doesn't work. I think another reason is that those zone blitz teams that run, it's usually out of a 3-4, and it's usually harder, to your point. A 3-4 is harder to read for a quarterback, knowing where the heat's coming from, because it can just come from more of a variety of angles versus having the 4 down linemen, and you have less guys to sort of play the am I coming, am I not coming game.
Right.
I'm up in the line, I'm out of the line, I'm up the line. But the thing with that too is that those defensive coordinators like a Dick LeBeau taught their defensive linemen exactly certain techniques in dropping into coverage. It wasn't simply, hey, Dan Hampton, you're just going to drop into back and just try to look for the ball and look for the man. It would literally be, there's a technique to how they train that. We're not a zone blitz scheme in our DNA. It's what we've talked about a lot. It's just it's not inherently built into the Carroll spine of his defense. So when he goes to it and when he starts to do blitz stuff, or that's not even a blitz stuff because he's going 3-man front, but that's why you do it normally. It's all foreign and it looks weird and the guys don't do it right because you don't know how to teach it. It's not within your scheme to do it. And it's the desperation of your situation that is causing you to call on this wild ass approach to things.
Yeah, and it's really getting to the point where I don't understand why I see it every Sunday. I feel like on any other team, these things would have been abandoned by now. I feel like on any other team, Norton would have been fired probably a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. So it just really makes you wonder what's going on with this team specifically. Or am I wrong? Is this standard business operating practice for other teams out there and I'm just not aware of it? I don't feel like it is.
No.
I don't feel like I see this level of nonsensical things happening with most other teams. So I don't really know what to say about it anymore. Um I will say that this offseason is going to be interesting, where we're going to kind of learn if we have a sort of Jerry Jones situation going on, where you have the guy making the decisions not able to fire himself because he's also in complete control of the team.
Yeah.
I remember back in 2008, Jerry Jones made a monster trade for Roy Williams, wide receiver, and he was awful. And everybody kind of knew he wasn't that good, but they traded for him because he was desperate. He traded a bunch of stuff for him. He was cut off the team after 3 mediocre years. And I was following Cowboys fans at the time, and they were saying like any GM who actually worked for somebody would have gotten fired for that terrible trade, but Jerry Jones can't fire himself, or he's not going to, so we're stuck with it. And that's where we are with like the Jamal Adams trade, where it's going right now, it looks like it's going to be worse than that trade. So, hey, this offseason, we're going to find out how much accountability we really have, because technically Carroll doesn't own the team, but does he actually own the team in practice? We're going to find out.
You know, it's an interesting point on your part, because I never thought of Carroll as sort of a new age Jerry Jones type, but it's a fit in the way that it plays out. They're different mentalities and different ways they go about it, but it all accomplishes the same kind of results, which is you have a dysfunctional leader at the head, making poor decisions kind of down the line time and time again versus the good decisions. It's further outweighed by the bad. You know, you might still have some good in there. Broken clocks right twice a day, but you're seeing this. Oh my goodness! And you're right. And I guess it's a good spot. Let's draw forward here to this a little bit. I am going to get a little. I know you hate predictions, but they're going to want it in the chat, so we're going to have to give them a Saints prediction at some point. But let's draw this forward a little bit. Because you're right. I find it hard to believe that if Carroll is the guy, I don't know. There's a bit of me that waffles on this, Brendan. There's a bit of me that looks at this and says, let's just take out the hopefulness for a second, folks. Again, this is me and Brendan thinking in multiple lanes. We hope for a playoff run. We are wishing greatness on this team going forward. That'd be awesome. We both acknowledge that, and we'll be talking about that weekly if we go down that path. That's not what we're discussing right now, though, because we're looking at where things are going from a theme. If this was a horror movie, right? You've got Freddy coming out with his claws slashing people. You got Jason. You know, people, bodies are getting dropped here. So we've got to look at this like, what is going to really happen this offseason the way we're seeing it right now, because it's going to be the biggest change we've seen in maybe Seahawks history. I mean, John Kidna was still here when Holmgren took over. He still had a little bit of baseline where we could be talking about new quarterback, new coach, new general manager. So the place to start with first on this, Brendan, before we get down to players on this, let's go to the head of this snake. Let's start with Carroll. I'm hoping that he sees this year play out and he understands the writing's on the wall. Fans are calling for my head right and left. My defense has fallen into ruins. I no longer can do even the moderate good things that I once used to be able to fall back on. That's fallen away. I'm hoping he at this point goes, I got to call it a day and retire. My day has come. Do you think that's realistic though? Or do you think, as to your point on that, he's the head? He's the head. Is he going to fire himself and he'll look in the mirror and say, "You're bad"? No, you're good. No, you're good. You're bad. Or is it he would look at that and really have at least the acumen and, I don't know, grace to say, I got to go.
Well, it's a lot of money to walk away from, right? Because he has that big contract that pays him like $12 million a year through 2025. If we're being real here, there are not a lot of people that are going to walk away from that money if they don't have to.
Yeah.
Now, and the other side of it is, I don't want to talk poorly about any Seahawks fans because we all have different ways that we digest the team, but the people like you and me, and the people who come, a lot of the people who come to our streams and our comment section, they are people who follow this team 7 days a week. They are people who follow this team for hours a day. What we don't see on YouTube so much are the 3 hour a week fans, but those guys make up, I would say, the majority of a sports fan base, right? They
Agreed.
are people who watch the game for 3 hours on Sunday or Monday or whatever. And then if they win, they're happy. If they lose, they're sad. And then the team ceases to exist until they play their next game.
Right.
A lot of
Absolutely.
these fans are only really in it for 3 hours a week. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all have lives. I would probably be a more productive person maybe if I only cared about the Seahawks 3 days a week.
Yeah, that's real
I think
talk.
there are a lot of people out there who wish I did. But if you're a 3 hour a week fan, all you see with the Seahawks is a team that always wins more than they loses and is having one bad year after 8 good years.
Yeah.
And all you're seeing right now is a coach who has won a Super Bowl, gone to a Super Bowl, made the playoffs 8 out of 9 years. You're seeing a quarterback that has had a winning record every year. You're seeing a defense that set an NFL record for competency by having, 4 straight number one scoring defense years. And you're looking at this one bad year and you're just like, oh, well, okay. It's like that thing I talk about sometimes, the people who say, well, we've been good for so many years in a row. Of course, there was eventually going to come to an end, as if this is all just like a roll of the dice every year. It's not. But if you fired Carroll or Carroll retired, I think a majority of Seahawks fans would be shocked and probably unhappy with it, because they are just those 3 hour a week fans who
Yeah.
just watch the games, and like they tune in week one and they're trying to figure out who are all these new players. I've never seen this guy before, because they legitimately don't follow the team in the offseason. Maybe they see that Richard Sherman got cut if something huge like that happens, but they're not following the team the way that you and me are. So I don't know if it is realistic, because Carroll's approval rating among those fans is probably still quite high. That would be my concern.
No, I agree with you. And frankly, just between us on this, just us in the chat on this, it's going to get quite insufferable having to listen to those fans as you and I, and those of us out in Seahawks land who are ready for change have to sit and stew to know that he's going to now be guiding us into this rebuild, pushing Russell out the door. That's the part that I hope is maybe just the point of the Rubicon for moving on from Carroll, is that it's one thing that your defense fails. It's one thing that your personnel decisions aren't working. It's one thing that you're no longer a development of talent on the defensive ball like you used to be. It's quite another when you pushed out the Hall of Fame quarterback who was still in his prime. All for your kind of pride and ego to redo this again your way. I do wonder if that's just maybe just enough, but I'm just hoping, Brendan. I'm hoping, because I said, it's going to be a long off season if he's sitting at the helm on this.
Yeah,
one.
that's actually a good point. If he pushes Wilson out, could that turn the casuals against him? Because the average fan, the 3 hour a week fan that I'm talking about, they love Wilson too, because they see a quarterback who has done nothing but win his whole career. They don't see the flaws that you or me sometimes see. Just like they might not even watch the draft. Like my dad is a huge Seahawks fan, and he watches every game and he does follow the team, but he doesn't watch the draft.
Yeah.
When the season starts, he's looking at our rookies like, who's this guy? Who's that guy? He's asking me like, who are these guys? And I have to tell him like, we drafted this guy. We signed this guy from UDFA, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of fans are just like that. So they don't see all these terrible first round picks. LJ Collier looks like Jordan Brooks is headed that way. Rashad Penny, Jermaine Ifedi. To them, they're just players. So I don't know. Maybe pushing Wilson out will actually be like a killing strike, but unless Carroll just decides he's having a miserable time because he's not reaching these players, it's hard for me to believe that anything changes. But in the spirit of being hopeful, I will say this. I don't know, because I like to be fair. I don't know if we're being totally fair with the Jody Allen thing right now, because I'm looking at the Jody Allen thing and what she sees as an owner. Since she took over, we've had 2 straight playoff appearances. We won the division last year, her first full year as an owner. I can understand why she wouldn't fire anyone after that. We haven't seen her react to an actually bad season. Maybe she will be proactive about this. It's not impossible. We assume that she's going to be completely hands-off because we know she's not a football fan. Not necessarily going to be true. Maybe she'll defer to somebody like Chuck Arnold.
Yeah.
That's the most optimistic take I have right now. But I don't think Carroll leaves unless he decides he's miserable enough to say goodbye to $50 million or whatever it would be.
Well, let's have you put. I'm gonna have you put you're on the Arnold committee here in a second. You're heading it up. First, I want to just acknowledge really quickly. We got a couple donos here. Leland Kimball says, "Pew pew, motherfuckers." Thank you, Leland. You're very kind. Always very kind on my chat. I appreciate you putting the $5 down, and I salute you, sir. Thank you so much. My cat is definitely in super needing mode right now. We also got to Devin Martzell. I think he's also a regular on your channel. What's up, Devin? $5 from you as well, sir. I appreciate you. He says, "Hey guys, good to see you both. I'm still optimistic. I can't give up yet, and I'm hoping for that big turnaround." Laughing out loud. Can't give up yet. Go Hawks. Well, go Hawks, Devin, and that's one reason I was. It maybe is a little bit annoying for you guys out there a little bit, but you're both me and Brendan at times trying to qualify and say, okay, look, we do want this to happen. We would love for the win to happen, but we both watch the rest of the NFL. We see other NFL teams. We see this team we look at this team as closely as anyone out there, day to day. Just eye right on it every time, and that we're more going off of what we're seeing. And it's hard to see that great turnaround. We are hopeful for it, though, at the end of the day. Me and him will be here sitting here smiling and laughing it up and yucking it up if this team goes on some 9-1 run down the stretch of things here. It would be fantastic. But we're just trying to stay in the lane of being realistic at this point in time, I think is the fair way to put it. But Devin, Leland, you both are awesome. Leland with your pew-pews. That is great. So I want Brendan here. What we're going to do is the way I want to put this down is you are at the head of the committee. You're advising Arnold, and he is going to listen to you wholeheartedly. Okay, you've got some photographs on him. Okay, I'm not going to say more on it, but let's just say you got some stuff of like he's going to hear what you're going to say. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So you're going to advise him on the next method of approach. General manager, coach. Fire Schneider, keep Schneider. I know you're not going to keep Carroll at that point, but give me your pathway here, the way you'd go about advising him.
I think that the only way to approach things when you do something like this is that you find your GM, and I don't know who the hot GM prospects are right now. I don't even know if that's really a thing. People talk about head coaching prospects sometimes, but you rarely hear people get all excited about, oh, this is the next hot GM prospect. But there are guys out there. The Panthers took one from us this most recent offseason, and he seems to be working out fairly well so far.
Yeah.
Fitterer?
That's right, Fitterer. Yeah.
Yeah. So you find that guy, and then you let him get whatever that he wants. It's up to him at that point. If he wants to go get Joe Brady, you give him Joe Brady. If he wants to go get Jim Harbaugh, you go with that. If he wants to go get Lincoln Riley, you let him do that. And you let him do things his own way. And then when you get the head coach, similarly, you let him build his coaching staff. You don't force anything on him. If the new coach says, give me the Oklahoma QB Rattler or whatever, even though I'm not a fan of his, you got to do it. If he says, I want to go trade for Daniel Jones from the Giants, you do that. What I really don't want to see is anything being forced on a new regime if we do bring in that new regime. So, a great example would be when the Dallas Cowboys in 2003 hired Bill Parcells to be their head coach. Jerry Jones told him, oh, you're going to have all the control. You're going to get to make all these decisions. It's all you, but you have to take Mike Zimmer as your defensive coordinator. Right. Bill Parcells didn't want to because he coached the 3-4 and Zimmer had never coached a 3-4 before. And Jerry Jones said, I don't care. He's your defensive coordinator. Suck it up. And that started that relationship out very poorly. And it ended up going in a relatively bad place. But you got to avoid stuff like that. Whatever the guy you pull in wants, you have to trust his judgment. Let him fail on his own terms. Don't make him fail because you didn't give him what he wanted.
I do agree with you on it. The one question I'd ask you is, do you feel like Schneider, you can definitely at this point put enough on Schneider to be able to differentiate from Carroll to make that firing? And is that the recommendation you would make?
I have a hard time differentiating Schneider from Carroll as well. I know you said that earlier in this stream, and I do too. It's really hard to know. Like, sometimes you can get a feel for it if you watch the press conferences. Like, I remember watching the press conferences after the draft 2 years ago, and I said, okay, Schneider does not really like DK Metcalf, and Carroll does. And Carroll does not really like Marquise Blair, and Schneider does. but most of the time it's really hard to know. It's really hard to know where these decisions are coming from. It's really hard to know who's doing what, but I would just kind of like to start fresh. I've always kind of felt like Schneider and Carroll were connected at the hip. To me, it would be kind of weird to keep one and get rid of the other. I think maybe you could justify keeping Schneider for a year or two to see what he can do without Carroll. But even if you look at the great Seahawks drafts of 10 years ago, 10 years plus now, there was, what was his name? The guy who ended up going to Washington, Scott McLaughlin. He was involved in those drafts, and it seems like he took a lot of knowledge with him when he went to Washington, when he left the Seahawks. So
yeah,
I don't think there's a whole lot holding me to John Schneider. It's not like he has any amazing successes over the last 8 years that make me go, I want to give him another chance without Carroll. We've had one above average draft in the last 8 years by my count.
yeah.
And maybe the Jordan Brooks draft will end up working out, but right now I'm not that impressed with it. So
Yeah, no,
yeah, I'm not holding anything to that. I'm not holding on to anything with John Schneider. I'm totally willing to go somewhere else with that.
Oh, well, and I'm kind of an either or on it too. The part I get to at the end of it is that Carroll is the guy at the end of the day who sits as the guy making the decisions, and that's the part where it'd be nice if you and I could be a fly in the wall to knowing who made what choice. Who was the LJ Collier pick? Was that a Carroll or was that a Schneider? Who's the Jordan Brooks? Is that a Carroll or a Schneider? Who pushed for the Jamal Adams trade in desperation? And is it all one guy making that, or is it a mix between them making that decision? Is the guy making the final call? Because Carroll does sit as that head lead dog. It sometimes makes me think that maybe Schneider's been overruled quite a bit. One of the reasons he flirted with Detroit last season before the extension was announced with him, right? Where he was thinking about that. Would the other question I have, would you be open to saying to the general manager, yeah, have your autonomy to do what you need to do? The one thing that I've been thinking about as I've been looking, kind of really getting in deep about thinking about the potential where we're going. Come on, Kitty. Is she is like relentless today for some reason. Is the thought process on what you asked to have instituted as the next scheme coming in? Like, they can hire whoever they want. The general manager can hire any coach. He can listen to that coach and bring in whoever he wants personnel wise. But on we play in this stadium. I've been thinking about this more and more, and I want to see you really think on your thoughts on this. You play in this open air stadium that's cold, it's windy, it's wet, a large period of the time. And right now we're trying to run this Waldron West Coast offense. And I tend to wonder if, in a general terms, as we move forward, it's not a better way to, rather than looking at the offenses that are in that precision-based, timing-based, short passing attack, where it's going to have the worst effects of those slippery wet balls, right? Because when you have a short route, for instance, that's less time for the receiver to get separation. The harder the quarterback's got to throw the ball now, that's the harder that makes the catch when it's a slippery wet ball, on top of windiness, so down the field, whatnot. My point on this is being, rather than that, you sort of transpose that onto the next general manager, and that you make sure whoever the guy is that he understands ideally, look, we're going to want to build not really an offense that's in that precise attack. Because Holmgren's my example for this. You brought Holmgren in, and his offense with the West Coast offense looked mighty different than it looked in the sunny San Francisco weather as it did here. And remember, we had this drop problem from about 2002 to 2004, right before the Super Bowl season, where we literally just couldn't catch the ball. And I think some of that was based on the fact that you're trying to run this precision-based thing, and it's just almost impossible in this type of weather here, and that you're better suited to still, I don't want to go run-centric, but what I've said, my ideal on this is just thinking about saying to the general manager, we want to bring in a guy who's going to be first an offensive-minded head coach, first and foremost, because it's an offensive league. Then I want an attack that's going to be a down the field attack where, a little bit like we've had in the Bevel Schottenheimer era, but not with the simplicity. You still bring in all the fly sweep games, the screen game, the stuff that's the flood concept stuff that McVay runs. You know what I mean? You do this other stuff that you build within that. So it's not just the one trick pony offense that we were running with Bevel and Schottenheimer, but that you still then operate with running the ball on a fairly balanced level, not 50-50. You still throw it 52, 53% of the time, 47 run. But then kind of have the general manager maybe be open to like embracing that aspect of it, because you're going to almost be set up to fail. He may have his ideology on a short passing, rhythm-based timing, and it comes in here and it just, half your games are in bad weather, my man. You know, what do you think on that?
Get a giant tarp. Our owner has money. Just throw it over the top of the stadium. I've wanted a dome here for years.
Oh, no. I do too.
I do too. Well, Well, you would expect a good general manager to build around the advantages that the team has for whatever reason. Like the GM of the Yankees is going to sign players who can hit to the right field for power because the wall over there is like 3 feet from home plate. Like, of course, I want power hitters who can take advantage of the fact that we have a very short porch on the right field wall. So yeah, you would expect a GM to acknowledge things like that and maybe build with that in mind. That's no problem. And I think that as a good football mind, you are able to sometimes adapt when the situation or the players that you have beg for you to do something else. Like if you're a head coach like who's used to running a 3-4, but you get plopped down on a team that has nobody who can play a 3-4, but it has great 4-3 guys, I would hope that you can go, okay, I'm going to run a 4-3 for now. I don't really want to, but it's clearly in the best interest of this team, so I'm going to do it. And I would hope that whoever you bring in is willing to do that.
Yeah, I would too. I would too. I would just sometimes as we've learned lately with our approach to things here, sometimes the straightforward, easy thing you'd think they would be considering somehow gets lost in the shuffle of the brilliance of the other items they're concentrating on, and they're putting at the head of their priority list. And that's just the one as I think about it going forward. Man, maybe that's not the best. And likewise too, I prefer seeing. I'm not going to dictate the defensive coordinator, but I kind of prefer to see a 3-4 attacking scheme. I prefer to see something that's a little bit more suffocating, a little bit more of a feeling like a landslide on an offense, as opposed to the bend but don't break soft zones that we've been running, lately. But that's again, that would be going a little bit away from your point of letting them have that autonomy. But that'd be the other place I just lean to after watching years of this sort of 4-3. We're just going to sit back and just kind of keep it all in front of us stuff. I think now you're better in the NFL to go for the attacking scheme that yeah, it's going to occasionally give up the deep ball, but it's acknowledging you're not stopping a modern offense anymore. There's no longer the days of you're just shutting everybody down. Yeah, there's some special defenses here and there, but your better approach is to acknowledge we're going to give up some plays, so let's try to create big plays within the big plays we give up. And to me, that recipe is built on the back of going to more of an attack-based scheme, putting it to the offense rather than having them take it to you.
Right. And you get to interview these guys. You can ask them how they feel about playing, having your team play half their games in this open air stadium in the Pacific Northwest, and you can see how they respond to that. And, you don't have to hire these guys blind. You don't have to hire somebody and hope they can figure that out. You can make sure they understand that going in. So I think that's totally reasonable, and that is something that I would definitely look for.
Would you like doing that too? Would you like an attack?
Yeah, of course. At the end of the day, I just want something that works effectively. I don't have any super strong bias towards a 4-3 or a 3-4 or a cover 2 or cover 3 or West Coast or vertical or spread. Just give me something that works with what you have. That's the most important thing.
Well, that's also a little bit of what I thought in this as well, is that there's a lot of people, I'm sure you're seeing many fans clamoring for it. We're just going to have to deal with my cat. She is not saying no. There's just a lot of fans clamoring for saying, we got to get rid of Jamal. Jamal is horrible. He sucks. And getting the ball bouncing off his face and then having another interception slide through his hands in this last game didn't help matters. But what I've said on this is that, and you've said this very well put, and that, did everybody forget how to play football this year all at the same time? Or is maybe there's something more at play here, which is a little bit of where I would land on this as well, right? You go to that 3-4 attacking scheme. Guess what? Now that's the best possible scheme for Adams, your most expensive defensive player moving forward. So it's a little bit of getting the best out of him as well, getting the most out of him as well. And that's a little bit of where I was thinking on this as well, is I think Darrell Taylor could be a fairly effective outside 3-4 linebacker. You could transition him, have him just a standing up going. I think he'd be just every bit as effective as he is now because of his skill set being just quickness and bend. That's going to translate to that to me.
Yeah. I wasn't crazy about the Jamal Adams trade when we made it. Part of the reason why I was okay with it was because we're so bad with using our first round picks, which is really not a good reason to like anything. The solution to being terrible in the first round should not be to trade all your first round picks. It should be to fire the guy who can't make those picks. But I know he's still good at football. Some people are just acting like, oh, he's terrible. He's not good at football. Like, he's just bad at it. That can't be true. I think if you really think about it for a minute or two, it becomes very clear that that cannot possibly be the case. He made all-pro first team with Adam Gase and Greg Williams on his coaching staff on a bad Jets team.
This is part of the drive me crazy about this, Brendan, is the people that are now sort of puffing out their chest and cuckooing about, I told you guys how bad he was. Like, what were you basing that on? He was outstanding in college. He was an All-American in college, right? He was actually one of the best in coverage in his final year of college before coming out. For 2 of his years in the Jets, he was absolutely upper level in coverage, an upper level rated safety, an all-pro to your point on that. His rookie year, he struggled. And then last year when he was injured with 4 injuries, he struggled. How do you look at that data and go, I knew he was going to suck. I knew he wasn't. I look at it more like, let's get him back to more where he was with the Jets when they had him rolling. Let's try to find and create that recipe again, maybe. And I think, again, when I saw that stat, Brendan, 40% single high safety, 40% of his snaps, single high safety. That is you want to talk about a fireable offense after you traded 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, Bradley McDougald, a single high, that's what you got Quandary Diggs here for.
Yeah. Yeah. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I'm not really into blaming players right now on this team. I'm not into getting mad at the players. Yeah, some of them probably need to go, but there's probably some very bad and very dysfunctional coaching going on with them that has to go away before I can judge most of these players. And a lot of these players who are not playing well right now, they played well last year. Carlos Dunlap looked like a top 10 defensive end last year. Kerry Hyder had a really good year for the Niners, and I don't think he's playing badly this year, but he's not getting the same degree of quarterback pressure at all.
No.
Poona Ford was better last year. Maybe Dwayne Brown's a guy who might have just gotten old, but he was better last year. All these guys were better last year. They were better for other teams. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to pin everything on these players just suddenly forgetting how to play football. That I don't believe that really happens. And if it does happen, it doesn't happen with, I don't know, 15, 20 players all at the same time.
I agreed 100%. I think that's too many guys. That just doesn't go down like that. That points more to what's going on in the locker room, what's going on with the coaching, what's going on with the atmosphere and environment you've created there. And that's what it points back to. And if you change those conditions, there's a good reason to believe that you can also get back some returns on guys that still have a lot of good football ahead of them. I mean, Poona Ford's still a young guy. Jamal Adams is a young guy. DJ Reed, Trevor, these guys are still young guys. They can still get along, but I'm in the same boat. I'm not as much into it's on these players and whatever. And the thought process of moving on from Jamal is really a silly one. You're already looking at the specter of having to trade Russell Wilson for $26 million of dead money hit. You're going to probably move on from Bobby Wagner, which will be at least a few $1,000,000 hit, even though you do save, collectively like $17 million on that. You're going to move on from LJ Collier, further dead money hit, albeit you still save $1 million there. Then you're going to then eat another $16 million on top of it by moving Adams. To me, that's not feasible. You can only eat so much dead money in a single offseason,
Right.
So it's that I hope that talk starts to die down a little bit. He's going to be here, and in the long term, whether you hate him or not. And I understand a lot of people hate him, but I don't understand. Do you would you have a caveat with the new general manager you bring in, or when you're interviewing to decide on the one you want to bring in? Would your approach be to let's do this right? Let's do this the new style Mariner way, or let's try to turn this thing around within a year? And we're again going to operate from the caveat within this that we'll do maybe both of them. But right now we'll first start out with the caveat that Russell Wilson's not here. Coach Carroll's gone and Russell's gone. You've cleared the deck. You're in the hiring phase of this general manager. Do you have maybe you let him just do what he wants to do? That might be what you want to say on this, but would you say, let's do take the time approach on this?
No, I would be willing to let him blow this team up. And I know what you just said about dead money, how you can only take on so much dead money in one offseason. But if you decide to take that Philadelphia 76ers strategy of trust the process, maybe you could actually just go ahead and shred the roster, take it on the chin in 2022, and then go forward for 2023. Because the thing is, whoever is the next head coach, and I have no idea who that could be. Let's say you do get rid of Carroll, though, you bring in somebody else. If that happens, even though this current roster might be pretty good, because I do think the current roster, it has talent in at least some areas. I do like some elements of this roster. I feel like these guys I feel like there are some of these guys that are good, but you bring in somebody else, they're not necessarily going to like these players in their scheme, in their fit. They're going to look at some of these guys and say, he's good, but I can't use him. So I think you do have to allow whoever you bring in the ultimate freedom to decide, you know what, Jamal Adams might be a great player, but I don't have a place for him in my defense. So maybe he can stick around for a year just to see if maybe something sticks, but ultimately he's not part of the plan. A great example of this was last offseason when we were in chats talking about moving on from Ken Norton Jr. And some people were asking, well, who do you replace him with? And some people said Wade Phillips. And I think some of them were just messing around because I think they know why that's a terrible idea. But some people weren't. And what I had to say was, Wade Phillips is going to look at this defense if he came here and be like, okay, we got to cut everybody. I can't use any of these guys except maybe Jamal Adams and maybe not even him. He would look at these guys and say, no, Kerry Hyder, I can't use him. He doesn't fit in my defense. Maybe he could use Darrell Taylor as like his next DeMarcus Ware type, but he would look at so many of these guys and say, yeah, he's good, but he doesn't fit what I do. So if you're going to bring in whoever it is as the next defensive coordinator, or maybe you hire a head coach who's a defensive guru, you got to kind of understand that they're going to let some good players go. And it's not because they're not good. It's just because they don't fit that scheme. That's what I think some people miss. Just because I think this roster is not that bad doesn't mean that you can keep all of it and it can just be like a Jim Harbaugh thing where he just completely takes over the Singletary roster and immediately wins with it. That doesn't happen that often.
No, and we don't want to count on anomalies or outliers. We want to count on what a general rule of thumb is in order to get to a point of success, because that's the way you can easier replicate that, as opposed to trying to find the Neo in the Matrix. Yeah, I agree with you there. It's again just part of the reason why I would like to do this in such a way where you get an offensive minded coach. I don't want him calling play. This is my ideal, Brendan, and let's see what you think of my ideal. Is I get an offensive minded coach. He doesn't call the plays. I don't like coaches calling plays, be it on the offense or defensive side of the ball. I want him there in the figurehead head coaching role, like Landry wearing his fedora, just rocking it, right? Mm-hmm. And then I want basically to do what the Rams did with Sean McVay when they brought him in, which is we're going to bring this defensive coach in who you don't have to worry about the defensive side of the ball. We're just going to get a great defensive coordinator. And I know that was Wade Phillips, but I'm looking for, okay, Brian Flores gets fired from the Dolphins, which looks like a very big possibility here this offseason. I go scoop him up. Jamal Adams is his perfect puzzle piece to use in his new system. And I think defensively, frankly, we get past Darrell Taylor and we get past, we get to Darrell Taylor and Jamal Adams, and you look at this defense moving forward, and Trey Brown too a little bit. The nice thing with Trey Brown is he's pretty ubiquitous as a player. He can play zone and man. He did a lot of man stuff at Oklahoma, so he can go between different schemes himself.
And he's going to be here for at least 2 more years anyway because he's on the rookie deal.
Right. But those 3 guys really, and that's really kind of it of all you're really married to. Jordan Brooks would probably be a fine 3-4 Mike linebacker. You need 2 of them. So you're probably going to find a spot for him as a Mike linebacker. Yeah, you got to turn over the whole basically cornerback room outside of Trey Brown. But guess what? We got to do that anyway. We're sitting on DJ Reed, who's going to be a free agent. Sidney Jones, I believe, is also going to be a free agent. You lost Trey Flowers. You're already moving that around. Quandre Diggs is going to be a free agent. You don't really know what you have in Marquise Blair at this point. Certainly not enough to strap your wagons to that and go, we'll count on him to absolutely be our free safety of the future and know that will be successful. So it's to me, at least, offensive side of the ball, maybe it's a different story where you can kind of go through some more items on that. But to me, the defensive side of the ball is one where it's open to churn. You've married yourself to Poona Ford and Jamal Adams, and that's basically it as far as money wise. And so that you put yourself in a position where even when you cut guys, it's not going to cost you a tremendous amount of money to move on. It's just about the additions and bringing in the guys that are right for the scheme. And that's why I like waiting the extra year as well, Brendan, is that you put yourself in a position of not reaching for guys to do things fast. You truly get the best player available in the draft because you have that second year, and they're sitting on a ton of cap space. That's the other thing about this is that 2023 right now with Russell Wilson's contract on the books, we have the 8th amount most of cap space for 2023. So if Russell's numbers came off those books, a couple other guys get sliced and diced, you're easily and far and away to have the most cap space then for 2023, not to mention the quarterbacks are so much better. And that was my last point I wanted to ask you about. Build to the offensive line before you go get your quarterback of the future. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I do like that. And What we're going to have to try to figure out over the next couple years is how much of that future offensive line is already here, which is one of the reasons why I say I'm not going to root for this team to lose. What if Kyle Fuller keeps getting better this year? Because he's been playing better lately. Corbin Smith has been all over this on Twitter. He's posted a lot of articles about Kyle Fuller and saying, wow, he actually looks good now. What if Kyle Fuller keeps getting better this year and he helps you win a couple games you otherwise would have lost? Isn't it worth getting a slightly worse draft pick to have Kyle Fuller possibly be part of the long-term offensive line as a good center? And like, let's say, I don't know if this is going to happen, but let's say Stone Forsythe or Jake Curhan eventually get in there this season and they play well and they at least look like they can be part of the future and they maybe help you win a game or two you wouldn't have won otherwise. That's worth more than losing every game so you can completely clean house. That's why I'm saying I don't want to go 2-15.
Yeah.
So are those guys going to be part of the future? Because we like Stone Forsythe around here. I was really excited when we drafted him, not because I'm 100% sure he's going to be a starter one day, but because I like the value. But the next coach, if you do bring in another guy, is going to have to look at a guy like a Stone Forsythe and make a decision pretty quickly. Do I believe this guy's going to be a starter at some point, or do I need to go get somebody else? Because left tackle, you can't really afford to mess around.
No, I like those guys, but I would be reticent to say let's count on those guys as de facto starter A or de facto starter B. And I'm with you. I'm high on Stone Forsythe. I really liked him quite a bit when we got him. The value was there, and again, he's a great pass protector at 6'8", and we're going into a pass league. That's a value for a guy at the left tackle position, 100%. But I would want, because of the fact that we've seen so often lately, my stance on it is that the offensive line has been left so wanting lately. We have undersold it time and time again. We've done the just do good enough approach to it over and over, that if I go into this offseason, and this is really looking in relation to the next quarterback you bring in, because I don't look to bring him. I look to bring in a journeyman this offseason myself, Brendan. I don't care if it's a Teddy Bridgewater, Daniel Jones in a trade. If you move Russell to the Giants and he comes back from that trade in the Giants, I don't care what it is. Journeyman this year, muddle through in 2022, go back to the quarterback draft in 2023, but lock down the offensive line in that time. We've got names like David Carr with the Houston Texans, gets the god-awful hell smacked out of him, never recovers, never stops seeing those. Sam Darnold, the same way with the Jets, in the way he was playing, were not a good offensive line in front of him. When you don't put a good offensive line in front of a young quarterback, he fails. And yet on the flip side of it, Dak Prescott, 2018 Jared Goff, go down the list of guys that have had good lines. Lamar Jackson in Baltimore has had a good offensive line there since day one. They get the ultimate quick success really fast having those lines. Josh Allen, another guy. So to me, that's the recipe in this stew that you've got to try to come up with. And to me, it is a little bit of, look, go get this, ideally this offseason to me, left tackle, center, right tackle. That's where I start on an ideal stretch this offseason, and then I move beyond it in. And it can be free agency, it can be draft. But I attack it, and I leave those guys on the roster. I mean, I want Fuller here. I want Stone here. But guess what? Now we have depth. We had Jamarco Jones playing left guard for us in this game. Jamarco Jones playing left guard. And that's where this line's been at too often recently, where we've not had the guys in backup that are even playing at their natural position because we're so thin at that given position. What do you think about that, though, building to the line?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what the Cowboys did. They spent, I think, 3 straight first-round picks on offensive linemen, and they built the Great Wall of Dallas. Now, it didn't win them anything, but that was because of other mistakes they made. Yeah. But the what was it? Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, Travis Frederick, and it took a while, but it did eventually work. Now, in order to make it work as fast as we would like we're talking about maybe making 2023 the plan. You're trying to be good again by 2023, maybe 2024. You do need to find that diamond in the rough, maybe. And maybe Damian Lewis is that. Maybe I don't know. He's not playing as well this year, but there are external circumstances around him. Maybe Damian Lewis can be like your, what was he, a 3rd-round pick? And if he ends up being your super rock solid starter, that's pretty good. But one thing that would really accelerate that rebuild to where you could be good again in 2023 would be if Stone Forsythe is the real deal. But you're going to have to kind of make that decision quickly if we're going to do to what you said, build the offensive line first, because that would kind of imply that you attack the offensive line really hard this offseason. Yeah. That would imply that maybe you're looking at a guy like a Daniel Falele from Minnesota in the 2nd round of the draft. He was my guy last year, but he didn't declare. So I'm kind of interested to see how we evaluate those guys, because we haven't seen anything of those guys really. We just know they have a little bit of potential and they could be good, but we're not really going to have time to find out before we have to make these offseason decisions, because Dwayne
No,
Brown is done.
and that's why I think you can't rely necessarily. It's like it's a bonus if he comes through. If he turns into this grade A player, eventually you can even maybe trade him for some assets. A guy you got him the 6th round, you can flip him back around. The thing that I target and do is like, let's say ideally, not ideally, but what you would do, I think would go on was you'd move Russell to the Giants. Giants would move on, probably want to move on for Daniel Jones. If say nothing, if they just move off their coach right now, that looks like a likelihood, as we say, and say now they'll probably move off their general manager at this point. So they clear house. They need a big win with their fans. They go get Russell. They flip us 3 first-round picks plus 1, not for another first-round pick, but a second or a third in addition. That's about probably the top you're going to get. Maybe Daniel Jones is a kicker for the year. That first-round pick you get from the Giants in the first year is a top 5 pick. But Brendan, I'm saying we don't go for the quarterback with that top 5 pick. You go BPA, best player available. And what we've seen the last 2 years of the player that would be available around on that probably 5th, 4th pick, right? Last year, Penny Sewell. The year before that, Micah Becton. You can usually get darn near the best left tackle in the whole draft right about that spot. And say nothing if we had Russell Okung went number 7. It was not a grade A left tackle. It was good. It's a good left tackle. And so that's where I would go this year to begin that process of building. You still have Stone there who can probably still do some swing stuff to the side on the right tackle if not. But then you've begun at that point to address it and hammer it. You can go buy in the free agency as well at that point to get guys more established. So it doesn't have to be like you mentioned with the Cowboys, all youth across the line. You mix a youth with a couple of guys you spend on who can help bring that line along quicker, in my estimation. You've got the cap money to do it at that point, by the way, because you're getting out of Bobby's deal. You're getting you do shed about $11 million on Russell's contract, even though he cost $26 million. You are saving $11 million off what he was going to cost you going into next season. So there is some money there as far as well. You can have rolling over. We're going to be rolling over, by the way, Brendan, probably $13 million at this point from this year's salary cap. So there'll be some money to spend. There'll be some draft picks to utilize with that stuff. I think it's the best approach, because I think you just see so much success with these young quarterbacks being given the line. Patrick Mahomes, all that time to be able to sit there and just look and just slice and dice. Look at how different Patrick Mahomes has looked since now they're trying to rebuild this offensive line and the Super Bowl, all that. It's not night and day, but there's a difference in the quality of the player at that point.
Right. The other possibility I want to explore is Denver, because I like Daniel Jones. I actually think that if you traded for him and gave him like a year to audition, there's a chance he might actually leave enough of an impression on you to feel like, hey, maybe we have a little something here. Maybe we can at least have him compete with the next guy.
Yeah.
But if you went with Denver, you could probably get a little bit more draft capital and also maybe get Drew Lock, who I don't know if Drew Lock's going to be good, but he's another guy that you could give the audition for a year and be like, okay, show me something. If you show me something, you can be here next year. If not, get out of here. I think that's on the table. Another interesting stopgap option, not that it really matters if you're just talking about a stopgap, would be what if you made a trade with the Falcons? Could you spin a trade with Atlanta for Matt Ryan?
They're stuck with him for 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like stuck because they just redid that contract this offseason to rebuild themselves to him. I looked into it, and it hammered them. It hammered their damn. They did. I don't know, Brendan. I don't know why they did it. It was dumb as hell. But it's to get off of him. I believe in the next 2 years is $40 million cap hit. I believe on the dead money hit to them.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they're in love with him in some ways the same way we were in love with Wilson and didn't want to move off him, even though we maybe should have. Maybe it's just the same thing. But there are a lot of different interesting options out there, a lot of different young quarterbacks. The Tua thing seems like it's about to be taken off the board because I guess Miami's about to trade him to Houston for Watson. That's the rumor right now anyway. So that's probably out.
That's good. Yeah, we didn't want Tua, man. We did not want Tua. I'm telling you, the Tua would have pissed you off having that guy between the injuries and the limited arm. It would have gotten old really quick for the fan base.
Yeah, I want to like Tua, but I don't think he's good.
It's just not. I think the injury, that hip injury was a tough one. That was the Bo Jackson injury. That ended Bo Jackson's career. This kid came back from it. Modern science has come along, but do you get everything? Just because you've come back at that point, I mean, Jackson had to have his whole hip replaced. Just because you've come back, does that mean that you're coming back at your most effective state of things? Probably not anymore. You probably, one way or another, you've taken too many lower leg injuries and you do lose a little bit of that athleticism and speed. Real quick,
Yeah.
we got another donation here. You guys are being super kind today. Jason McEward with the $5 donation. I salute you, sir, and I thank you, as does Brandon, of course. Where's Dunlap at, Brandon? No pressure this year. Him and Adam plays to their contract. We have a top 5 defense. Let's go Hawks. Let's hear it, 12s. See Hawks. Well, what are your thoughts on this, Brandon? What has happened with Carlos Dunlap this year? Break down the skinny for me
Yeah,
on this
that
one.
to me is just a complete mystery. I don't know. That to me is one of the hardest things to understand because with Jamal, I can kind of see we're not using him right. That's obvious when you take a look at the 40% single high safety or whatever it is now. It's probably even higher right now. It's
Yeah.
very obvious to me that that's a bad idea and that's why he's not getting pressure. But with Dunlap, you think it would be pretty obvious, right? You just say, hey, you go get the QB. It's just like telling the Hulk to smash. Like that's not that there's not a whole lot to it. And he's been doing it for forever. So I don't understand it. And I tend to not assume that a player is just resting easy because he got paid. I
Yeah.
think that until a player gives me a reason to believe that that's what they're doing, then I'm not going to assume that. So I don't think it's that. So that one just confuses me. He's not that old. And he was playing really well all the way through the end of last season. So it's not like he was showing signs of wearing down. I don't know. I am truly confused about the Dunlap thing. A lot of the other struggles on this defense I can kind of trace back. Like Jordan Brooks is bad in coverage. Oh wow, I'm so surprised by that after watching his college tape.
Yes.
Sidney Jones. Oh, I'm really surprised that he's bad after being a bust in Philadelphia and and after he had the massive ACL injury that completely destroyed his level of talent, probably. But the Dunlap thing, I have to admit, I don't know how to explain it. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, when he was not being a productive rush with the Bengals at the end, it was because the Bengals were sitting him because they wanted to bring out their young pass rushers before they traded him to us. It wasn't a matter of he was being ineffective as a pass rusher, and to go from the high to heights, as you said, he was a top 10 pass rusher in the back half of the schedule, probably top 5 in effectiveness and efficiency in generating pressures and his pass rush win rate. And then now he has completely fallen off and given you none of that. You see no wins, you see no pressures. I believe Darrell Taylor was the only guy that had a quarterback hit in this last game, and it's startling to see how
Well,
it got
he,
fallen.
in fairness to Dunlap, he is actually getting some pressures, but I'm not paying $10 million a year for pressures.
That's it.
Sorry, and he's averaging like a pressure a game. That's not cutting it.
No,
That's not
I
worth
I
the
can get
money.
that out of Benson Mayoa when I'm not dropping him in coverage, man. You know,
Right.
when I'm not having him Deion Sanders it, he can give me one pressure a game. You know, if not the occasional sack. Even Benson Mayoa's got I think more sacks this year than Dunlap does, which is
And
just a
Hyder
general
and
story.
Adams, like
And Hyder and Adams. At least with Hyder, he is giving you good run stuffing. I'll give him that.
yeah,
Like he's been solid. He's been every bit that guy that was the third rated edge defender in the run game last year with San Fran. He has been that for us in our run game for the most part. And that part's been at least that's what we needed most out of him to provide because
yeah.
that was going to be the LJ Collier role back in the day. But that's at least been good there. I mean, we got to look at some of those bright spots, and that's been one of the bright spots with it. Okay, so we've got our team built. I think you're in a little more of a kind of trust the guy, make the right hire, let it kind of fountain down from there where then he trusts the coach and the coach and then kind of comes back to him like you said, hey, I need this coach, I need this quarterback, I need this player for the defense, for the scheme. I'm a little bit I want to do a little bit of let's make sure we're doing it under this lens of things. But we both, I think, are in the same standpoint of believing that this does need kind of a full change at the end of the day. I'm a little maybe more open to Schneider, but some of this, I think, Brendan, is us would have to be in that committee going, okay, let's us understand who made these decisions to then make the judgment. It's hard to make the judgment unless you have the information, which we just don't quite have with him. Is there anything else you would want to see with the new organization that comes in, be it a general manager, be it a coach, be it a scheme, be it a type of player, be it a general, just any kind of generality or specificity of what you'd like to see out of the team going forward that might be a change from what we've had in the Coach Carroll era?
I would like to see somebody who's a little more up to date with the way he looks at football, somebody who will use those analytics, somebody who
Well
will.
said.
I mean, I think that kind of goes without saying, though. I don't think you're going to find anybody who says, no, I want an old head coach who chews tobacco on the sideline and, uh, just
I don't know, man.
goes with
Dan
his gut.
Campbell got hired this offseason. You're saying this stuff like it's just straightforward stuff, but I actually think it's pretty smart stuff because it's stuff that we would be surprised, I think, at the amount of front offices still in the NFL that are not fully embraced. They've hired an analytical department, right? They got him in the basement with the guy who's got the red stapler from Office Space, right? But they're not using them. They're giving them reports and they're taking the reports and they're dropping it right in the bin. And they're like, yeah, give me my old stodgy scout with the cigar poked out of his mouth, talking about players, whatever, like some scene out of Moneyball, and so I think the analytic thing is a great point on your part to point to, because yes, you need to start embracing this stuff. This is the direction of where it's going, where the sport's going. It's going to fall in line with what baseball and has happened in basketball. It's just a matter of time, in my
Right.
opinion.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Ravens. Look at how Jim Harbaugh makes some of these decisions. He's using math, and he's trusting his players too. Like he goes up to Lamar Jackson and asks him, "Do you want to go for it on fourth down?" And he knows he's going to say, "Yeah, of course I want to go for it on fourth
Yeah,
down," but he trusts him to go do it,
I still love
and
it.
it almost always works.
Yeah. Yeah. You still love it. It doesn't matter in the motions of that moment. Maybe that is what you're doing, but it's still a smart. That's what I was saying about a little bit too, where you're not a guy like Harbaugh's not a guy bogged down by play calling, right? I've got my defensive calling and I got to get my plays in and he's looking at his sheet all the time, right? No, instead he's watching what's going on in the game. He's paying attention to what's happening out and about. It's like Belichick's the same way. Like I was hearing a story about Belichick. Seth Wickersham just wrote that book about the Brady thing, and I haven't read it or anything, but just hearing some tidbits about it and how Belichick will just be sometimes looking across to the other opposing sideline, just watching what they're doing and what's going on. And that's Harbaugh to your, yeah, he's got the analytics. They'll come in, they'll give him in his ear and say, okay, they say, but then he's also just kind of reading the moment with it. And he's in the moment as a coach and watching what's going on in the game, not caught in all this other stuff and bogged down. Holmgren used to say like, oh, I got hormonal there after this bad call by the refs. And I forgot my play sheet for a few minutes. Like you get caught in that point. So, yeah, a great move by Harbaugh. He is one of the embracers. Baltimore's had how many injuries this year they've had, and they're still rolling along. Like that speaks to the depth of their roster and how well they build the roster so smartly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. They had all those injuries. They started 0-1. It looked like it was over, and they were 5-0 since, I think. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's 5-0.
yeah,
They had a lucky break against Kansas City where the running back fumbled when they had the game won, but still, it's impressive.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the main thing. I feel like that's kind of tautology. I know what you said about a lot of these front offices still want like a General Patton type who
Yeah.
just goes off his gut, but I feel like for people like you and me, we're pretty into the
Yeah.
new way of looking at the sport, new way of looking at football.
Yeah.
So that would be something I want a coach who's at least open to that kind of stuff. I would like somebody young, so if they're good, they can be here for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like you're ever going to lose a bidding war with another owner and not be able to keep them. So the Rams might have Sean McVay for the next 40 years, for all we know. That's a hell of an advantage.
Oh, it
Uh,
is.
mhm.
Absolutely. Is there
Yeah.
a guy you got in mind that if you had a dream scenario, like I just, again, like I did where I put you on the committee with Arnold, if I'm putting you up there where you can just literally touch anybody that's available out there,
Mm.
college or pros.
I think probably right now on the little bit of work that I've done, I kind of like somebody like a Joe Brady because he's young and he's got a lot of potential. You would probably have to pay him a lot of money. God, the Urban Meyer thing has gone so bad. I feel like these hotshot college coaches are going to be there's going to be a negative stigma around them for a while because this Urban Meyer thing is going so bad.
Yeah.
But we've also seen it go very well sometimes. Like, I mean, Jim Harbaugh was good at first. Jim Harbaugh had 3 great seasons, and then there was a power struggle. He was a hotshot college coach from his time in Stanford. We
Yeah.
had some success with it with Carroll. He was a hotshot head coach. I know he was old, but um, I think that's probably my favorite guy as of right now. I'm going to have to do more looking into it. I'm somewhat skeptical on the Eric Bieniemy stuff, which most people are in love with right now. I could go either way on that. Lincoln Riley, that's a little more interesting to me, but I would go with Joe Brady first. I think.
I almost it would in regards to Bieniemy, I'm falling more and more in line with you the more I think about it. and I'd say this, I'd almost lean to a Daboll. If I've got to choose between an offensive coordinator in the league and not go for a proven coach, I'd almost go for the Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator
Mm.
over Bieniemy, who has called plays, who's taken a rough and rugged guy out of Wyoming who could throw 50% of his completion percentages and got that guy up over 70% and continuing to ascend. Not with like a stacked offense, by the way. I mean, yeah, Stephon Diggs is good, but who else scares you on that offense besides Diggs? And yet it's been pretty prolific with the ball running. Not to say he'd be my first choice, but just towards that Bieniemy, if it's a matter of we're looking at the coordinator, I might lean the other way with that.
The only other guy that I would bring up here would be Kellen Moore. I do like him a lot. I like the way
Yeah.
he looks at football. The issue there would be he would probably want to call the plays. And then you have the problem that you were introducing. Maybe he has somebody on that Cowboy staff he could take with him who he trusts to be the play caller, but he's probably going to want to call plays because he's still young and he just started calling plays in Dallas like 3 years ago. So,
Yeah.
but I like the way he looks at football.
Yeah, and he's a local guy too. Goes to Boise State, I think he went to. So he's got some connections here to the region. I'm with you on him. What he's done and what he's taken, where he's taken Dak Prescott, as his productivity goes, is phenomenal. And it's not just behind the line, the wall of the Cowboys, like you mentioned. You had the phrase for it. I've lost the phrase, but it's not just on the back of that. It's not just back on the receivers. It's them being very creative. It's them being very innovative in how they attack offensively. And I like that. I like his approach. He'd be an interesting guy. And again, I want to lean to an offensive-minded head coach first and foremost. I think it's a league that's built on scoring. So let's get the offensive guy. And it wouldn't be a deal breaker for me on calling the plays. It's a preference, but as long as he leaves the defense alone at that point and doesn't get himself with all his fingers and all the pies like Carroll has, I want personnel say, and hey, I'm gonna have my say on the offense, and hey, I want to have some say on the defense. Let me hire a yes man for the defense so I can run that too. It's too much. A coach can't do it. We saw it with Holmgren. I frankly think we're seeing it with Carroll right now. When you wear too many different hats, you don't do anything well as a coach or an overarching head of the structure at one given time. Carroll got through some of it for a good amount of time. Some of that was he had Schneider in place where Carroll just tried to be, or where Holmgren tried to be just a general manager from day one. He tried to wear all the hats literally, where at least Carroll knew enough to put a guy to where who can do most of the work and the heavy lifting of the general manager dumb. But that's the place where I think you got to kind of cut that line off and make sure that they're concentrating on the thing that they need to be good at. You just need to be eyed on this.
Yeah. I think Chip Kelly, the head coach, was actually pretty good. Everything went to where when he took over that GM job and started shipping out random players and bringing in random players and nothing worked. Like sometimes the best thing you can do is acknowledge your strengths and weaknesses and work around them.
Well, and if you're looking, I'm not gonna advocate Chip Kelly here, Brendan.
No,
Okay,
no.
but a former coach of the NFL that didn't work, huge amount of college success, coming out of California. Sounds a little familiar though. Does sound familiar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not saying
if we did it, I'd be like, okay.
Hey,
Please get another GM.
it would be exciting. It would. Chip Kelly would make it exciting. That offense would be out there and just trying to run up and down the field. Though he wouldn't. Again, he would not be my first choice. There'd be plenty of other guys that'd be up ahead of him on the list. But I'm sure he'd be up on the general first list that comes out. They'd have him along there with all the other names. That somebody would probably throw that out there with the success that he's having with UCLA. Well, I guess any kind of other thoughts you might have here. We're an hour 20 in on this. Anything that you're on your mind with this, either be it in the future, where we're at with this team, or what to look for as we kind of go forward?
I think we covered it pretty well today, man. I mean, it's kind of weird being in a position where we're in the middle of a season and we have so little to say about the games and so much to say about what this team is going to do in 6 months, we hope. But that's the situation that we have right now, and we're dealing with it the best we can. I think we both do a really good job trying to talk about it. I know on my channel next week, I'm probably going to be doing a lot of videos talking specifically about what next season is going to potentially look like, depending on what path we choose.
Yeah.
I think that at the end of the day, like, we're obviously going to sit down and watch this Monday night game against the Saints. I'm going to hope we play well. I'm going to hope that, hey, even if you don't win, I hope that Kyle Fuller keeps getting better to the point by the end of the year we're like, wow, we nailed that one. That guy can be part of the future, actually. Wow.
Yeah.
I hope that Darrell Taylor continues to look like he can be the foundational pass rusher for a future good defense. But my mind really is on how much of this stuff can we burn down this offseason.
Yeah.
Hopefully a lot of it, because even the things on this team that I like, they probably still have to go. I still like Wilson, but it's probably time. I like some of these guys on these defenses. Bobby Wagner might be my favorite player of all time, but he's definitely got to go. Guys like Kerry Hyder, I like him, got to go. So that's where my mind is right now. I can't help it.
No, and I agree, and I know fans that sometimes it's why we sometimes try to lead with, look, we love Wilson, we love the team, we love all these things, but we're still looking at this in the other lens of things, which is with as much reality as we can. As much we got me and Brendan are going to have our biases we bring into this, but we are trying to sort of shed that bias as we look at the team as much as humanly possible. So root for them, but look at them with like what's really happening and going on here. And it's sometimes, I know for some of our subscribers on both sides of it, they will sometimes bristle at that a little bit. But I would just counter back to you that it's better than just waving the palms, and it's better to look at this stuff with a bit of reality. Sometimes it'll be a bit negative, but look, we're in a negative stage of things where the franchise is a bit. When it turns around to be positive, guess what? There's going to be a lot of positive. Brendan's going to be cooking out videos about Darrell Taylor being the next LT, and you're going to get stuff like that coming down the track, but that's not where we're at right now. It's raining outside, and we're pulling out our umbrellas and appropriately trying to make sure we're not going to, get wet. And that's, I think, I hope you guys appreciate that. I appreciate it from Brendan's angle of it. I've told you, Brendan, I don't think there's a lot of NFL channels out there that do this kind of stuff, not just with our Seahawks, but out across the board in the NFL that don't they struggle to toe that line. They end up falling back into Positiveville every time, and it just becomes the pom-poms. And it really, I think that gets old and that gets lame and not very exciting.
Yeah, there are plenty of pom-pom channels out there. If they don't like the way we talk about the Seahawks, then there are other places they can go. That's fine. And hey, I tried to be positive too. I tried to be positive before this season started. I did. I said, hey, I think that this offseason was good enough to get us to where we want to go. Yeah. I predicted that we were going to have a really good season this year. I was like, this is going to work. That's going to work, because apparently incorrectly, I just assumed a base level of competency from this coaching staff in front office. I thought we traded. I thought we traded for Jamal Adams to use him like Jamal Adams. Yeah. I thought we gave all these pass rushers all this money because we knew they were going to be productive, and none of it's really panning out. So you go with what you have.
You got to pivot at that point.
Right, absolutely. And that's all I got.
All right, well, that's well said. I want to just thank Andrew Logan for becoming a member of the channel. And Andrew and new members, we got an article I just posted on my season rebuild, Brendan. I did 3,000 words on it. I went deep on it. So you can see it on my community channel page over there if you want to select that. But thank you, Andrew Logan, for becoming a member. Thank you to the folks that have donated here on this stream. You'll see down in the description section of this video a link back to Brendan's channel. So if you're not already subscribed, what are you doing? What's going on here? Come on. All you got to do is do a little clickety clack. He's right on over there. So just click on that link down there in the description section. You can go over there and link onto his channel. And again, we do some similar stuff, but Brendan's got a very much his niche on what he does there. He's I would call you the de facto daily source of Seahawks news there, as far as catching stuff on the fly and being on it and not just reporting it, but getting into the details of it. I really do appreciate that about you. I love that about your channel, man. You're absolutely killing. Like I said, even in this downward season, you're pumping out the subs and rolling. You'll beat the 10,000 here, man. No time flat. I'm telling you, no time flat. So,
right.
Well, thank you to everyone here who checked in. We had a bunch of people jumping in. I appreciate you all coming in on a Thursday here. Me and Brendan will be back next week. I'll be over back on his side, and hopefully maybe we could talk about a win. As we so often get a chance to do this season so far. But even if not, we get to talk a little bit more about our fleshing out of our offseason and plan in the direction that we'd like to see this team go, which will be fun too. It's fun getting to talk about change, man. We've been seeing the same thing for 10 years here. We're going to get to see something new. That's interesting. That's fun to look at. So
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brendan, for jumping on. Appreciate you, my
problem.
guy. And please, guys, like the video if you do like what you're seeing. And sorry, Brendan, last thing I got to do, of course, is just thank you again to the sponsor of the show, Manscaped. Right now, they, of course, are sponsoring my show here at Hawks Nest. They're a great product. You go get the cutting-edge technology as far as your Manscaped needs go. And they have a nice, unique code you can use. That is my code. It's NEST. Save you 20% off, free shipping, and you help the channel, help us grow. I would love it if you go do that. So if you need any lower manscaping needs, go to manscaped.com, use my code NEST. I really do appreciate it. Thank you again, Brendon, for coming on the show. And we will be right back with you guys in a week. But just don't you never forget, Brendon.
Go Seahawks.
Go Hawks, baby.